welcome to TheraWin.Health, your one-stop shop for exploring the beauty of culture and therapy. So today we have with us Veronica. Hi Veronica, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm amazing. Thank you so much for joining us for this podcast. We're really excited to talk to you. Okay,
Yes. Thank you for having me.
thank you. So Veronica, we'll start with your introduction. Can you tell us something about yourself, provide a background about your experience with bicultural living?
Yes. So, first of all, let me just say that I'm Veronica Cerda. I'm a licensed professional therapist, counselor, and I have a practice in Dallas, Texas, where we provide counseling to people of different backgrounds, different populations, where we provide like a vulnerable, open space where people can talk about their feelings and really express themselves. I want to provide that comfort for people of different cultures and different backgrounds. Yes, I grew up, I was born in Mexico, in San Luis Potosí, which is a state in Mexico. And when I was 4 years old, we moved to Texas. And so I grew up, living in Texas and having summers in Mexico. And I really have a lot of fond memories of that. But I do remember as I was getting older, like as a kid, when people would ask me, hey, where are you from? I would kind of lie and say that I was from St. Louis because I didn't want people to know that I was from a different country. Like there was some shame
Mhm.
there that I hadn't recognized at the time was shame. It was just like, I just don't want to be different from other people.
Right.
Um, so, that's something that I feel like continued on in my life as a teen. It was, bringing my friends over to the house and my parents were speaking a different language. And I used to be embarrassed about that. Or my dad dropping me off and having loud Mexican music in the car and me being like, please turn it down.
Mhm.
Um, it was something that just continued on until honestly, very recently, I kind of realized, hey, there's some shame there. I didn't recognize it because I was so proud of being Mexican and I love being Mexican and I love our food. I love the culture. I love everything about it. But there was something that was still that I was kind of holding back because I was in the US and it didn't feel like I could fully be myself, especially with the negative stereotypes. I didn't want to be
Mhm.
affiliated with negative stereotypes. I just wanted to be proud of myself and I wanted to be like everybody else.
Right, right. So I think you talked about being associated with certain stereotypes, right?
Mhm.
So can you share something? What actually, as a child, you really don't know much, but you're still, kind of ashamed of telling your friends that you're Mexican. So what are these stereotypes that you're talking about?
As a kid, I think that I don't know if it was necessarily stereotypes that I was concerned with. I think as a kid, it was more of me just being different. Like I didn't want to be different. I think
Hmm.
as I got older, I would hear people say, you know, just different negative stereotypes of like Mexican people being poor or this like feeling of being uneducated or um, having lots of kids, or like also the women being very submissive, or coming in the United States, it's a big thing of like being illegal. And so I felt like I always had to prove like, no, I am legal. Like my parents, they were actually from the US and they went to Mexico. And so
Right.
I always felt almost like defensive about it. And I even have like a memory of so my dad he was a business owner, he was an entrepreneur,
Hmm.
and he had restaurants and bakeries and a nightclub in the US. And I used to help him out at the restaurants. And I have a memory of, I was a teenager at the time and I was like serving this guy and he kept calling me Maria, Maria. And I was just like, I was the only one in the restaurant. So I was like, who is he talking to? And I realized me, because I'm Mexican, he just assumed my name was Maria.
Right.
And so that's also just kind of evidence of like, oh, I'm just being boxed into this because I'm brown. And it was really hard.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so tough, right? I mean, as a child dealing with all of those things where people assume you to a certain way, that must be
Mhm.
really pain. And that's something that a lot of cultural people living in US are feeling this way. We see a lot that people, they're pretty woke about culture, but to a certain extent, people from other cultures feel kind of isolated in US, right?
Yes. Yes,
Mhm.
definitely. there's a feeling of like wanting the pride and expression of who you are, and then when other people shame you for it, it's a very confusing feeling.
Right, right. So while so what led you to become a therapist and start practicing your therapy practices for cultural people?
So I grew up with my mom having panic attacks, and I remember asking them like, "What's wrong with my mom?" And they'd be like, "She's fine. She just needs to take some medicine." And as I was growing up, I learned my mom had a really tough upbringing and she had a lot of trauma in her life.
Hmm.
And so when I went to study psychology, it's kind of when I started identifying like, oh, my mom wasn't sick, like she was having panic attacks. And
Hmm.
it was something that even after college, I started having a lot of anxiety, and I went to see a therapist, and everything kind of just like got put together, and I was like, okay, like this is what you do to help with these feelings of anxiety, these feelings of depression. So that's when I decided to go back and get my master's. And I remember just being in class and being like, this is where I'm supposed to be, like this is where I need to be. And honestly, I don't feel like I went and searched for it. I feel like it came to me. Like once I started practicing and once I became a therapist, I saw people come to me and they're like, I just, I want someone that looks like me. I want someone who's brown like me. I want someone who has a different culture. And I've learned, okay, like this is something that I'm able to provide for people. I didn't even realize this is something that was needed. I just realized,
Right.
hey, like I get it. You want someone that can understand you.
Hmm. True. Yeah. And how was your parents' reaction or people from your own culture when you said that you want to practice therapy or you want to be a licensed professional?
I mean, I think my parents were proud of me. I think ultimately they were proud that I wanted to better myself and to be successful and to do good in the world. Ultimately, they were proud of me. They didn't really, and still don't really understand therapy. No one's trying to go to therapy in my family still.
Hmm.
They are proud of me for being, independent, successful, and like trying to help people, but they still don't really necessarily understand the mental health part
Understand
of
it.
it. Yeah.
Hmm. And what is the mindset of people in Mexico about therapy? Like, do they think that it's okay for people to talk about it, for people to go there, or they're still a bit shy to talk about
From what I know, I think that there's still, I think kind of in like similar to the US where people are starting to open up, people are starting to recognize like this is something that's needed. But I do think that that big stigma of, therapies for crazy people is something that still is big and sticks out. And I still hear it now too when I, with my friends or with people I mean, I'm like, therapy's good. Like you should go to therapy. Like this is something you could work out in therapy. And they're like, no, like that's for crazy people. I'm not crazy. And it's like, no, like this therapy is for everybody. It's for, struggling with your parents, having a fight with your partner,
it.
having a bad breakup, not knowing what to do with your grades, like feeling stuck. It could be anything. You don't have to be quote unquote crazy to go to
Mhm.
therapy.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't understand why do people take it so much extreme, right? I feel mental health is a spectrum. You don't have to be totally sane and totally insane for going to therapy. You can lie anywhere in between and still do it for your own well-being.
Yes, exactly. I know. And I think that it would help us a lot more because people wouldn't get to that really bad point if we could just start doing therapy from the beginning, from when the point where they start feeling sad or when they start
Hmm.
feeling like they're having some negative thoughts and they don't know what to do about them. If we could just start early, then it wouldn't get as bad as it does.
Yes, it does. True, true. So since you have engaged with a lot of people from your own community, from other community in US, what are the major struggles that they are dealing with right now?
I think that a big one that I see is society, like societal pressures. So people
Hmm.
thinking, if I do this or if I fail this or if my marriage fails or if, I'm not able to succeed in these things, like what are people going to think? What are my parents going to think? I think there's a lot of fear of judgment, of what others are going to think about you. Even especially with COVID, I think that a lot of people, because they were secluded and they were to themselves, it felt very safe. And now that they have to go back out there, it's that fear of like having to talk to people. How do I start a conversation? What are people going to think of me? Are they judging me just because I'm here? It's the fear of others.
Hmm. Right. And how do you help clients unpack and address, like intergenerational trauma? We call that. That is something stemming from their past experiences of discrimination, of being other cultures staying in the US.
Yes. So, I've heard a lot of stories. And I think that intergenerational trauma is hard for the person to identify. Like they're not like, oh, I'm coming here for intergenerational trauma. I think it's something that we end up unpacking. Like it's like, oh, I do this, and my mom did this, and my grandmother did this, and I feels kind of bad, but I don't know why. And so like, wait, like where did this come from? Why is this being affected? So I really dig deep. I ask questions. I try to understand the story of their family, and like if it's immigrants, like how did they come to be? What made them come? What was that
Mhm.
immigration story like? How did they adapt? What is it like now? Is there any fears about that? What barriers are you having at this point? So just kind of asking a lot of questions, really digging into the person. Because I think a lot of times we live our lives and we don't really look back and think about like, what did grandma do? What did mom do? And I think that is the intergenerational trauma. It's insidious. Like we don't really see it until we have to dig deep in there and really understand what the patterns of behavior have been in our family.
Right. It's it's a really interesting concept that, we're talking about. So do you think this intergenerational trauma, it affects, more majorly a lot of people in the bloodline, or is it like one or two people in the bloodline?
In the what line?
Yeah, so basically my question is that the intergenerational trauma that we're talking about, does it affect all the people in the bloodline? Like we talk now that
Oh,
their grandmothers are facing this, my mother is facing this. So is it more possible for me also to face this, or is it like 50-50 chance? How does it work?
I think it depends. A lot of the way that we grow up and the way that we see the world has to do with the people who raised us, right? If that's our parents, they model for us how to be adults, how to be people. We usually end up we either do exactly what they did or we try to rebel and do everything against it because we didn't like how they handled it. So I think the intergenerational trauma, I mean, even for instance, like for me, there's generations of women who, married young and, had their husband and didn't have anything for themselves except for raising the family. And that was something that they did for generations and generations. And I saw how it affected my mom. My mom felt like a lack of sense of purpose. There was no meaning there. That's where her depression came from a lot of times. And that's something that I was like, I don't want that. I'm going to cut that here because
Right,
I don't want to be in that position.
right, right. Veronica, have you heard about the concept black sheep in a family?
Yes.
It's a interesting topic. Can you share some light on it?
Yeah. I mean, I think that I'm the black sheep in my family. I have three brothers and one sister,
Hmm.
and they are 17 years older than me. Like the one closest to me in age is 17 years older than me. So
Hmm.
my mom had them in her 20s and then had me in her 40s.
Hmm.
So, and they all grew up in Mexico, and I grew up in the US, right? So the way that they see the world, the way that they value life, the way that they process things is completely different than the way that I do because of my American, you know, lenses that I have.
Hmm.
So I've always felt like I was the different one. And I think that is, initially it felt, you feel kind of like outside of your family. You're like, oh, I'm so different. Why am I so different from everybody else? But really it's a beautiful thing because it
Hmm.
gives you the space to be yourself, the space to choose what you want and not feel you don't have to shame yourself for it. You can just embrace it and love it. You're the first of what you're doing, and that's okay.
Yeah, right. I think it's also very empowering that You see a lot of patterns, as we talked about, intergenerational things going on. And then you're somebody that is cutting that out, that is breaking that out. There's so much power that comes with it that your child or people, after you won't be dealing with those things.
Yes, yes, definitely. I think I think a big thing is like it gives you power to choose. Like if you want to be that person, like the person that, but had like the choices that have been made, you can go back and make those choices. But you can also make a different choice. So I think there's freedom in it as well.
Just freedom. Exactly. Yeah. So, Veronica, as you mentioned that, you and your siblings were have a very different lens of viewing things since they were born in Mexico and then you're in US. So, um, can has it ever happened to you that uh, you know how they see their identity in US and how you see yourself living in US is kind of different, you know? Uh, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. So I think that it's hard for me because I don't really know what their life was like in Mexico. I went to Mexico for the summers. They lived in Mexico. So I'm sure that it was hard for them to kind of transfer into the US.
Hmm.
Um, I think for me, I was very fortunate enough to go to a school where there was people of like different social economic statuses. So there was like really wealthy people, and then there was like me who was just like barely trying to make it there. And I was able to see power. I was able to see what different like social economic statuses look like. And I think that also gave me kind of perspective of like, oh, like these people are working really hard in this, or like this is what they're doing with their money, or like this is where money can take you. I didn't see that growing up.
Right.
We weren't very wealthy. So I was able to, and they would take me places. So I was able to see different things that they probably never got to see or haven't been able to see. And I think that expanded my mind and has helped me also kind of understand people a little bit more.
Right, right. So if you don't mind, where did you do your schooling from? From.
So I went to in Dallas. I went to a Catholic school called Bishop Lynch,
Hmm.
and then for my undergrad, I went to Texas Tech, which is in East Texas, and then
Okay.
for my graduate, I went to Texas Women's University.
Hmm. So like all throughout your education, did you see that there were, like coming from a whole different culture, and then you're suddenly within people who have their own cultures, who are practicing different things. So have you seen some differences in traditions or differences in how people address themselves, how people, view other people? So how was that for you, the transition?
Yeah, I think the first evidence, or the first time I actually experienced that, was when I was a kid. We were living in a house, and our next door neighbors were Indian, and
Hmm.
I was a nosy kid, and I'd love to go and like knock on their door and say hello, and they'd invite me in and they'd let me have their food, and I was like, I love this food. And so I really started being like, Mom, like, can we go to Indian restaurants? And like, I think as a kid, I even tried to expand myself and like try to learn different cultures. And I love food. So I was like always trying to learn about the different foods, and I wanted to understand them. And so I always really tried to make a conscious effort of trying to expand myself and like learn about other people. And I think as I got older, I did that as well. And now, as I'm a therapist and seeing my different clients, I have clients that, from different parts of the world. I really, try to learn as much about them. And I ask a lot of questions, like I said, because I want to I want to understand them. I don't want them to understand me and come into my box. I want to go into their box and understand where they're coming from, how they see the world, and how they want the world to turn out for them.
Yeah, right. So like, uh, what type of cultural background people have you, provided therapy to as of now?
So far I've had clients from Pakistan. I've have clients from India. I have Hispanic clients. I have Caucasian clients from the US. I have some from the UK. from Barcelona, from Chile. And I think that's it so far.
Wow, that's like pretty good bunch of people. That's
Yeah.
interesting. So like, uh, do you use different types of therapy for all these people, or like how does it work? You know, since your approach has to be different for all these people.
Yeah, I think, what I've learned really is that, yes, we're maybe from different parts of the world, but we're all human. We all, struggle with the same things. We all care about our families. We all care about our friends. We all need the same support system. We all feel the same feelings, maybe just in different contexts sometimes. There's maybe like certain cultures that really, it's really important for them to have the support of their family. Their family kind of helps them throughout their life in every aspect. Um, and so I really kind of meet the person as the person, who are you and like what's important to you. And then from there, we kind of build on, okay, like what are your goals? What are your fears? How is this attached to your culture? And I think also me learning about their culture, I'm able to be like, hey, like, isn't this something that you said is really tied to your culture? And, that's where this is coming from. And they're like, oh yeah, you're right. So kind of learning and understanding the person as as we get to know each other a little bit more.
Right, right. Okay, so Veronica, as you talked about that, you cater to a lot of people coming from different cultures, right? So this happens a
Mhm.
lot that um, whenever a person comes to US, right, there is a lot of expectations attached to them from their family, from the society as well. So, you know, how important it is to challenge these expectations and prioritizing your mental health, and how can people do that?
Yeah. So you're right. There is a lot of like pressure if it's not to assimilate, it's to uh, do certain work, to learn how to speak the language. And I think it can be really difficult. And I I think that ultimately it's about kind of embracing as much as they can. So, I think it's on a one-on-one basis. Some people feel very comfortable with kind of keeping to themselves and, staying within the family and staying within their community, finding their community in whatever city they're in. And I think that's perfectly okay. Like if that makes them feel happy, then that's okay. But while there's others who kind of feel like they have to assimilate more or learn the language faster, as long as they feel comfortable with it, it feels authentic to them, that's something that they want, they strive for. I think that as they're able to do that, they should do it. I think it's on a one-on-one basis. So I hate putting people in a box of like, you have to do this or you have to do that. It's like, how do you feel? Is that something that you want to do, or is that something that it feels uncomfortable for you? And just because it feels uncomfortable for you now doesn't mean it'll always feel uncomfortable. Maybe that's something you want to revisit later. So it's kind of learning how to listen to yourself and figuring out what works best for you. And also kind of remembering your goals. What is it that I'm trying to accomplish here? And how can I get there with the tools that I have
Right,
as
right.
well?
So this, like listening to your own intuition that we talk about. Um, Sometimes it might happen that people, you're in a different setting altogether. You're new in the US, and it might happen that you yourself don't know what's best for you, right? When,
Mhm.
say, a student coming for studies in US, and they kind of don't know what they want to do, and they can't even talk to their family members about their mental health because probably they won't understand it, and they have very limited friends, in their circle who they can open up to. So what is the best situation in this?
Yes, I think, and I've actually seen this situation before, and it's definitely reaching out to a mental health therapist, finding also maybe even finding people in their community, in like if they go to school, like other people who may be also transfer students or come from different countries too, so they can have like someone that they're like can understand and connect to, even if it's not from the same country. It's still like the experience is still different of like them coming from a different country and speaking a different language or having to do different like traditions, different cultures, different societal norms. So connecting with those people while also connecting with a mental health therapist to kind of walk them through this new environment and like what's coming up for them and what are the fears or what are things that are making them feel anxious or uncomfortable. And if they do want to talk to their family, maybe it is a little scary to talk to their family, or they don't know how to talk to their family. Or maybe their family is like, you're going to be there
Right,
and you're in the United States, so you should be happy that you're there. And they feel this guilt of like not being happy because they're in this
right,
very
right.
different land.
And you know, from afar, when we see a student living their life in the US and not staying there, people usually say that it's all fun and nice, but it's just that person knows how, you know, it is liberating, but at the same time, you have to handle all of these expectations. So it kind of gets really tough, right?
I think it's addressing the barriers. So just having campus, like if it's a school, right, having campuses spread information about therapy, like making it more accessible, making it easy for people to reach out to somebody, or even like transportation wise, like where are the nearest counseling places where they could find a bus or a train or a friend to give them a ride there. Um, Also making sure that like they're providing resources for inexpensive or affordable mental health care, because I think that's also a barrier. Some people are like, I can't afford this, or how am I going to pay for it? So being able to, give all these resources of like, well, in this clinic, we're able to provide, a sliding scale that'll provide more affordable health care. I think just talking about it more and normalizing it within those environments will help people feel more comfortable going to them.
Right, right. So do you think that in all of these things, there is a chance that cultural competent care is kind of getting missed out since we see very less of it to talk about? Say, as simple as multilingual therapy resources, right?
Mhm.
So, what do you think about it?
Yes, yes, I definitely do. I don't think that we have enough resources in different languages. Ultimately, I think that what I probably see the most of is in Spanish, because especially in Texas, we have a huge Hispanic population. But aside from that, I don't see it in regards to any other culture. That's why even like with my website, which I probably do need to make it in different languages. So thank you for giving me that idea. But I think that I try to portray people of different ethnicities and different backgrounds. And that was something that I did on purpose because I wanted to make sure that people from different cultures can say, hey, like that looks like me. They're on the website, so I should be able to come and like try to bring that comfort to them.
Right, right. I think it's as simple as adding the image, as you said. A lot of resources that I personally have seen, we usually see like, you know, people there. So it's kind of you, anyways, you feel disassociated with that resource, that maybe it's not about me, or, you know, maybe it's not for me, like that. So yeah, I think we should definitely, there needs to be a lot of changes in regarding this. Yeah,
Yes, definitely. Even outside of, that made me think even outside of cultures, it's making sure that it's addressed to everyone, not just, I think that a lot of therapy is addressed to like women. So making
right,
sure that it's not just women, it's also men. It's everybody. It's not just one type of person.
right. Mhm. Okay, so Veronica, taking the conversation back, I think you mentioned that your dad owned a lot of restaurants, a lot of, like bakery, and you would help them with it. So, has he ever faced any difficulty in being an entrepreneur coming from different culture in US?
Um, yes, so my dad was a typical Mexican man, and like that he didn't really talk a lot. He didn't really share a lot. He kept a lot to himself. So I didn't really necessarily know the struggles that he went through, But as I got older and, from college, I'd go back and work at the bakery sometimes and help him. And I would start saying things like, Dad, like you can expand. These are things that you can do to better your businesses. I saw the competition coming in. Like, how can make this so people want to come here rather than the competition? And I think at that level, my dad wasn't able to further himself at that point. It was hard he was comfortable providing what he could, like what he knew in regards to business, but he wasn't able to like level up in that way. Um, and I don't know if that was like a lack of education. I don't know if that was a lack of resources. I also know that my dad kind of stayed within the Mexican community. He didn't expand. And I think that would have been helpful because I see now, like on Instagram, people having like Mexican bakeries and just making them like
Yeah.
Instagram worthy. So like different people come and visit, So, that was something, I mean, that this is recent, but this is something that could have already been started before, to bring more people in. So I think in some ways, because of our resources, because he wasn't able to fully assimilate, or not even necessarily assimilate, but expand within his reach, within like his knowledge, that held him back from being more successful than he could have been.
Hmm. Hmm. And, do you think it happens with people from different culture, or like you feel kind of hesitant since the only goal that you came here with was to sustain yourself and your family, right? So thinking a bit ahead of it seems like, you know, a bit scary for our parents. It feels like, like this is okay. I'm able to provide for myself. I'm able to provide for my family, and I'm a good man in the community. I think that's all we need.
Yes. Yes, the just trying to survive kind of
Yeah.
feel, right? And the thing is that you see also people come in to this country. I've heard stories of like I came with $4 in my pocket and
Hmm.
they become successful business owners. So it's hard.
Right.
I don't think that I yet have understood what's the difference between that person that came in with $4 and has like a bunch of successful businesses versus the one who is barely making it with their one business and is struggling to grow. It might be like on an individual basis, like how far is a person willing to take themselves? How far is a person willing to really get themselves out of their comfort zone? I think that's a big thing too. Like how comfortable are you around people of I know with my dad, like he really struggled being comfortable around people of different cultures because it was different. He didn't know the language very well. He doesn't know how to approach people of different cultures. So I think that also kind of held him back. And I think there's other people who embrace other cultures or at least pretend to embrace it until they actually are comfortable with it. And maybe that helps them expand more too.
Right, right. So, Veronica, with you, is there any, tradition in your family that you really want to hold on to, living in US, and you also want to pass it to your generation?
Yeah, I think, to be completely honest, like I don't know if there's any Mexican cultures that are like, this is like something that we do as Mexicans. Like I think that ultimately when I think about my Mexican culture, I think about the food. So yes, I definitely want to pass down the food. And I'm
I
not
think
the
that's not going anywhere.
Yes, that is not going anywhere. I do need to work on cooking a little bit better. I cook, but I'm not like my mom's cooking is significantly better and my sister's. So that's something that I personally want to work on. But yes, like that's something that I want to pass on, the traditions of the meals that we have. And every holiday we do have different meals. Like during Christmas we have tamales, we have pozole, there's just like different things that we do during different times of the year. So that is something that I would like to continue.
Hmm.
And I think another thing that really sticks out to me is just being like a Catholic family. Like we were raised Catholic. My grandparents were like, it's something that's been really strong and passed on within our family. And even though, I'm very different, like we talked about the black sheep of the family, that's something that still holds very close in my heart. And so that's something that I want to continue passing on to my daughter.
Right, right. That's interesting. So, Veronica, say that, in Indian culture, religion is like a big thing, right? your parents hold it very closely. So for a person who, um, there might be, like, say, my brother is not that much religious. So it comes to my parents as a very disrespect. That how can you not be religious, right? So does that happen with Mexican community as well? Are they very religious?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, everyone, I have brothers who aren't very religious. They haven't followed like some of the religious customs. And, it's hard for my mom. She prays about it all the time and it really hurts her heart. And, I don't think that makes him less Mexican. Like, I don't think that it takes away from his identity, but I think ultimately for my mom, it's more of like a spiritual thing of like, you're getting further and further away from where you need to be. And so it is something that's like very difficult for my mom, at least at this point, to understand.
Right. Yeah, yeah. So like, uh, since your mom feels so deeply about it and she feels really sad when your brother doesn't follow it. So like, how is her reaction when she sees, you know, say like other white people, uh, their religious beliefs and how they follow? Since we see that uh, American family and their children, they don't usually, have much expectations out of their children in following the same religion. So they're pretty much open about it. So
Yeah.
how is her reaction about this?
I was fortunate enough to grow up in a family that was very accepting of others. So they might not understand and they might not get involved because they don't get it and they don't fear it, but they were always very accepting and they were never shameful of other people. So seeing, you know, my mom seeing my friends be a different religion or, people of different cultures, she always, accepted people as they are. That's where they come from. And I think that's where my values probably come from too. I don't ever, I accept people where they are. It's not for me to judge what people's religion is or, what they believe in.
Right, right. And I think that happens with uh, that happens with like us, the multicultural people, they are pretty much open with what other people are following, right? Because we have seen the kind of expectations that were thrown on us while living in US, that you have to speak certain language, you have to have this kind of pronunciation. So why does that happen that if we are so much open with different type of people and their cultural beliefs, their languages, why does we feel so much ashamed ourselves while we're growing up, coming from a different culture, living in the US? Why is it not normalized for us?
I think it's the pressure to be, I think in the US, at least I can speak for the US, I think there's a big pressure to be the same, to be like everybody else, In the US, you hear a lot like we're in America, you need to speak English. Like there's this heavy influence on like having to be similar. And I mean, to be honest, like America is a melting pot. We are a country of immigrants. So there
Yeah,
is no like yes, our mother tongue is English, but ultimately really it's a bunch of other languages too, right? So I think that rather than us trying to force everyone to fit in this box of like what being American is, we should just embrace it as a colorful country of different religions, different cultures, and different backgrounds.
right. That's rightly said. We really need um, the space to grow, the space to access and you know be proud of our own culture, our own languages. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think there's a big pressure on like having to pick one, like you're either American or you're your culture. And personally, me, I'm right now trying to figure out this is my journey of finding out who am I and like how can I embrace both and just be myself. Like I don't want to have to pick one because I am both, I am Mexican. I was born in Mexico. My parents are Mexican, but but I grew up in the United States. Like a lot of the way that I see the world is very American. So how can I combine those two and just embrace them rather than feel like I have to fit in a box for others?
Right, right. True. Okay, so Veronica, we have had really great conversations with for a lot of topics. So, as the end note, how would you like to give tips to people who are struggling with mental health issues and they're kind of fearful of seeking for help in the US?
Yes. So, if you're struggling with feelings of anxiety, and, to be very specific, like anxiety could be like that feeling like deep in your chest that like feels like there's pressure, like foggy mind, like not being able to sleep, not being able to eat well, feeling hopeless, like feelings of depression, right? Having low energy, wanting to be inside, being afraid to be outside, having like physical reactions to other people around you or certain things that may be triggering you. Those are all reasons to seek for mental help, or even just having a really tough breakup and not knowing how to get through it, or, having issues like this with your parents where you want to make your parents happy, but at the same time, that's not what you want in your heart. Those are all reasons to go and seek a mental health therapist. And they're not there to judge you. They're not there to tell you what to do. They're just there to like walk you through your pain and through your struggles and like help you understand and maybe gain better clarity of like how to move forward from there.
You're right. Thank you. Thank you so much for this tip. I'm sure our audience will really benefit from it. And we are, so happy to have you on board. We had really nice conversation with you. So thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you for having me.